Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network, WWF In Your House 7, Good Friends, Better Enemies, which you can find on Peacock under Season 2, Episode 2 on In Your House. If you haven't seen any of my shows before, we do rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Let's jump right in. The first match of the show, we have what was originally going to be a singles match between the British Bulldog and Jake the Snake Roberts, which was turned into a tag team match with Owen Hart and the British Bulldog teaming up against Ahmed Johnson and Jake the Snake Roberts. There was a lot with Jim Cornette, who was managing Owen and Bulldog at the time, and Clarence Mason, who had banned the Snake from the ring because Bulldog was afraid of Jake Snake. So when he went to the back, he brought out Ahmed. You know, I was a little bit surprised with this match. Anytime you see the name Ahmed Johnson on a match, you can't help but think the worst. Ahmed was not a great wrestler by any means. But this ended up being okay. I mean, it wasn't Jake's best match. It wasn't the Bulldog or Owen's best match. It's probably one of the better ones I've seen of Ahmed. And this was early enough into his career that the crowd was still super hyped and super into Ahmed Johnson. Owen and Bulldog pick up the win after Owen hits Jake in the back of the knee with a Cornette's racket, and Bulldog puts on a heel hook, thus causing Jake to give up. I'm going to give this one a 3. I thought it was good, better than I expected. I actually expected it to be a bad stinker just because of Ahmed Johnson. Now, coming from that, our next match of the show, we have the Ultimate Warrior vs. Goldust, and I hesitate to call this a match. This kind of felt like it would have been a segment on Monday Night Raw where they teased Goldust not coming into the ring and not wanting to come into the ring to face a Warrior. But again, it felt like it was more fit for Monday Night Raw, and I know we're still in the time where the In Your House pay-per-view was about half what you would spend on a regular pay-per-view, so I get it, they weren't giving out the best WrestleMania type matches, but still, if I'm paying my hard-earned money, give me something better than this. And this is no knock on either wrestler, the Goldust or the Warrior. There was a lot, about 8 minutes of it, not a whole lot of anything happened. The main thing of note is Warrior burnt Goldust's hands with Marlena's cigar. Warrior didn't even take off his duster vest that he wore at the time. The couple things of note, Goldust had a bodyguard who went unnamed at this time, which was Mantar, which is cool. I forgot that they tried to repackage him. I kind of wish it would have caught on, because I kind of feel bad that the guy had to go through the Mantar gimmick and really wasn't anything else and didn't really get another chance. I know he went on to be Tank a little bit later in the Truth Commission, but I just wish the guy would have got a better chance, basically, is what I'm saying. Warrior wins by a count out. Ultimately, the ref eventually just counts Goldust out from stalling. I'm giving this to a 2. It wasn't really much of anything. Goldust's annex save it from being a 1, but I could have done without it. Next up, we get a backstage segment with Doc Hendricks, aka Michael P.S. Hayes, and he's outside of Shawn Michaels' dressing room where Owen and the Bulldog are trying to get into the dressing room, and they're teasing something about Diana. I think that this was a time that they were teasing that Shawn Michaels was going to steal Diana from the Bulldog. That's another storyline that's probably best left way back in the past. It wasn't that great. Coming from that, we get Big Van Vader, or just Vader at the time, against Razor Ramon. This is one of the reasons why I picked this show. This was the last televised matches of Razor Ramon and Diesel before they left to go to WCW and form the Outsiders and the NWO. This was roughly a little bit over a month before that happened, and basically changed wrestling. So I wanted to look at this and watch these matches and see and listen to the commentary, and there was some quips on commentary about bad decisions being made, because at this point they had both already put in their notices, and this was a solid match. It was good. I kind of wish it was better because I enjoy Vader so much. I enjoy Razor Ramon so much. it just kind of felt, again, much like a Monday Night Raw match, a middle-of-the-road type match for these two guys. Vader does pick up the win because Razor Ramon, obviously, on his way out, is going to lose. He's a guy that a lot of people say, didn't respect the business, but he really did, and I mean, he definitely did here. He did the time-honored tradition of putting somebody else over on the way out. After the match, we have Doc Hendricks coming out and he's talking to Yokozuna and Jim Cornette, talking to Vader and Jim Cornette. Confusing because Cornette was also Vader or Yoko's manager at one point. And the reason for him coming out is to tell Vader that he's having a match at the next In Your House against Yokozuna, who he had injured a little bit ago. So pretty good. All in all, I'm going to give that segment a 3. Again, I thought it was good. I expected better. Next up, we get our Tag Team Championship match. The Bonnie Donnas, Skip and Zip versus the Godwins, Henry O and Phineas. Bonnie Donnas obviously are Dr. Tom Pritchard and Chris Candido. Godwins, everybody knows them. This was a good match, and of course the Godwins have Hillbilly Jim and the Bonnie Donnas have Sonny, so there's all that interaction. This wasn't a good match. I just said it was. I meant to say it wasn't a good match. Again, I hate to harp on this, but for this being an In Your House, it really did not feel special. It felt like just like any other run-of-the-mill WWF show of the time. And I'm gonna touch on this at the end when I cover the whole thing, but I just didn't get this. It never felt like it caught on. The Bonnie Donnas did pick up the win here after some cheating with Sonny. I'm gonna give this one a 2. Again, I just didn't think it was good. Next up, we get an interview in the back with Doc Hendricks, who's all over the place, interviewing Mark Marrow and Sable. Sable doesn't say anything. Mark Marrow is talking about how earlier on the pre-show, Hunter Hearst Helmsley had attacked him, so this was the start, or while they were in the middle of their feud. I like that feud a lot, actually. It's one of the feuds that a lot of people don't really think about or don't really give a lot of credence to. But I really enjoyed the Hunter Hearst Helmsley Mark Marrow dichotomy. I liked their matches against each other. I liked how they built everything. I thought it was a good feud, in my opinion. Mark Marrow didn't quite pan out the way he was expected to in WWE, which famously, if you listen to Mick Foley, he's mentioned it. Mark Marrow was the first guy to get a guaranteed contract when Mick Foley and Steve Austin didn't. And you see how that turned out. They expected a lot of Mark Marrow, and I'm not knocking Mark at all. I enjoy his work. I like him better as Johnny B. Bad personally, and I love the stuff he does now. My best friend's mom, who's like a second mother to me, she doesn't even watch wrestling, and she's constantly posting videos that Mark Marrow puts up where he's visiting high schools and he's visiting people and, basically being a great public speaker and a great person to go out there, a motivational speaker. So yeah, I really enjoy what he's doing now. I think he's kind of awesome. I'd love to meet him at some point because, again, I do think he's awesome. Going from that, we go to our main event of the show, a no-holds-barred match for the WWF Championship. The reason for the name of the show, Shawn Michaels versus Diesel. And this is, again, Diesel's last match before he goes on to be just Kevin Nash in WCW and change the wrestling business. I really enjoyed this match. This is probably my favorite match, or not probably, it's definitely my favorite match of the show. I always liked the way these two worked against each other. Shawn Michaels gave so much to Nash, or Diesel at this point, to make him look like a big, unstoppable monster, whereas Nash also gave so much to Shawn to make it look like, yeah, it's credible that this guy's that's almost a foot smaller than you and 100 pounds less than you could definitely beat you. Because the way they worked the matches and the psychology behind them, you believed his comebacks, you believed his attacks against Diesel. It took 3 or 4 kicks to knock Diesel down, where Diesel could just hit one forearm and it would knock Shawn down. I really enjoyed their matches. This was probably right up there. It was one of the great matches they had with each other. Obviously, Shawn Michaels did pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 4. Overall, I thought the card was underwhelming. I felt like just like any other Monday Night Raw that you could have watched at the time. It didn't feel special. It didn't feel like an In Your House would. There's a lot of In Your House shows that are really good. Mind Games, I think, is maybe 2 months away from this, or 3 months later. So that you got that, one of the best In Your Houses there ever was. And there's a lot of them, like the Return of the Taker. There's a lot of really good In Your Houses. So it's not just the fact that they only half-assed it on In Your House. It's just this one felt half-assed. And I know it's not a bigger pay-per-view. I know that it was just there to be just there. Kind of their equivalent of Clash of the Champions. But I still expected more. Overall, I'm going to give it a 2. Besides the main event, a really skippable card, a really skippable show. I mean, you can watch it if you like some of these wrestlers. You can watch it for the time capsule to know we're less than 2 months away from the NWO, and we still got Razor Ramon and Diesel. We got WWE trying to push Mark Marrow, Ultimate Warrior being brought back as something to try and build the Ultimate Warrior. Ahmed Johnson being a guy they're firmly behind. You could see where some of their mistakes were in the year, and this is 96. You could see some of their mistakes there, whereas go to a year later, we're starting to see guys like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Steve Austin pick up steam. We're starting to see DX come out, and that's just a little bit over a year after this. But during this time, you could kind of see where Vince hadn't flipped that switch and hadn't changed from a style he'd been using for at least 7-8 years at that point. I mean, people say the 80s was cartoony, but it wasn't as cartoony as the early 90s to about here. I mean, we still had like the Body Donnas, who are 2 great wrestlers, don't get me wrong, but the gimmick was kind of meh. The Godwins, I mean, that's a gimmick that's been ran in wrestling for 30 years. I mean, the Ultimate Warrior, a guy that was on top 5 years before this and hadn't been, and people really didn't care about him anymore. Ahmed Johnson, a guy that they tried to build, much like Mark Marrow, they tried to build them like the baby faces of the 80s. So you could see Vince was still very much stuck in that era. It would change drastically in about a year, and in a couple months, the whole industry changes with the NWO. Again, I'm going to give it a 2. I thought only the main event is something I'd recommend watching. Rest of the card, pretty skippable. Let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments. Make sure you smash that like button, share, subscribe if you haven't. And if you made it all the way to the end, let's put NWO is coming in the comments, because we know it's coming not too long after that. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.